Your roadmap to the latest in auto. Welcome to Highway Herald. Buckle up. 2025's G7 summit in Alberta was less of a diplomatic gathering and more of a geopolitical demolition derby. President Trump roared back onto the world stage with a heavy foot and little braking distance, hiking tariffs, taunting allies, and igniting tempers in both trade and foreign policy circles. As Canada and Europe pushed back with precision-engineered rebuttals, the question hung in the air like burnt clutch smoke. Is the U.S. isolating itself in the global convoy? Let's get under the hood of this high-stakes summit and examine how diplomacy, trade, and automotive industries are being jolted into uncharted lanes. Retaliation shifted into high gear. Trump's tariff blitz on Canada. In 2025, Trump reignited U.S.-Canada trade tensions by imposing 25% tariffs on Canadian goods and 10% on energy, crippling America's top steel and aluminum source. Canada swiftly retaliated with equal tariffs and a viral Buy Canadian campaign. Just before the G7 summit, Trump doubled down, hiking tariffs to 50%, triggering supply chain disruptions. From pricier suspension systems to delayed tooling parts, the impact rippled across the auto industry, hitting manufacturers, suppliers, and consumers alike. At the summit, Prime Minister Mark Carney refused to back down, rejecting Trump's overtures. As investor confidence wanes, North American trade is now rattling in gear. While Trump pushes America first, Canada is forging new trade ties with Europe and the Indo-Pacific. For U.S. automakers, already burdened by rising costs, the future looks more uncertain than ever, a twisting course rather than a straightaway. The once stable U.S.-Canada trade relationship now faces a bumpy ride fueled by economic nationalism and political friction. And it's not just Canada pushing back. Europe came to the G7 with its own game plan. European allies hit the brakes. G7 resistance against U.S. aggression. At the 2025 G7 summit, Europe pushed back hard against Trump's tariff-driven agenda. French President Emmanuel Macron set the tone early from Greenland, rejecting U.S. ambitions in the Arctic. At the summit, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen condemned Trump's protectionism, warning that tariffs are taxes hurting families and businesses. She laid out a proactive plan to stabilize trade, diversify critical mineral supply chains, vital for EVs, and pledged 150 billion euros to support Ukraine, reinforcing Europe's growing leadership role. Germany, Italy, and Japan echoed the call for rules-based cooperation, opposing Trump's confrontational approach. For automakers and global industries, Europe's message was clear: stability drives innovation. Meanwhile, U.S. manufacturers already strained by rising material costs face growing uncertainty. The widening rift between the U.S. and its allies is more than diplomatic. It signals shifting power dynamics. As America accelerates down a protectionist path, the global community is choosing collaboration, leaving U.S. leadership and the auto industry at a critical crossroads. But Europe wasn't the only one questioning U.S. leadership. Trump himself brought the biggest curveball to the summit floor. Before we delve deeper, we'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to Highway Herald. Your support fuels our passion to bring you the latest in vehicle trends and geopolitical developments shaping the industry. The G7 wildcard, Trump's push to re-invite Russia and include China. At the 2025 G7 summit, Trump ignited controversy by suggesting Russia be readmitted, and even floated China joining, turning the G7 into a G9. His claim that Putin should be here, and that the Ukraine war wouldn't have happened under his watch, shocked allies. German Chancellor Merz called the idea unacceptable, while Italian Prime Minister Meloni reaffirmed the G7's foundation on democracy and the rule of law. Trump defended his proposal as strategic realism, but critics warned it legitimizes authoritarianism and weakens alliances. For industries, especially automotive sectors reliant on global stability, the implications are serious. Sanctions, disrupted supply chains, and geopolitical tension threaten critical areas like EV battery sourcing and international investment. As Europe and other G7 members reaffirmed their commitment to shared values, Trump's stance isolated the U.S. vision from the collective. Whether the U.S. is choosing to exit the global leadership highway or being quietly left behind remains the pressing question as alliances shift and industries brace for impact. And while the world watched Trump's foreign policy unfold, another front opened up, this time right at home. Operation Safeguard ignites domestic unrest. As global attention focused on the G7 summit, a political earthquake shook the U.S. homeland. Days after reclaiming the presidency, Trump launched Operation Safeguard, deploying over 200 ICE agents to Chicago in what he hailed as the largest mass deportation initiative in U.S. history. Sanctuary cities were the first to feel the shock. Immigrant-heavy communities like Little Village faced raids without discretion. Longtime residents, families, even non-criminals were swept up. Critics called it a civil rights crisis in the making. Local leaders like Mayor Brandon Johnson and Governor Pritzker condemned the crackdown, while legal aid groups and Know Your Rights workshops mobilized. Economically, the toll is mounting. Industries like construction and hospitality, which rely heavily on immigrant labor, now face major disruptions. ICE itself is strained, grappling with a $230 million budget gap and overflowing detention centers. Lawsuits are already mounting. Yet Trump presses on, turning immigration enforcement into a political rally cry. For his base, it's red meat. For the nation, a deeply divisive reckoning. Meanwhile, internationally, a broader question emerged. Is the U.S. losing its place in the global convoy? G7 realignment. Is the U.S. losing its place in the pack? At the 2025 G7 summit, one question dominated. Is the U.S. being pushed to the sidelines of a changing global order? Trump returned with tariffs and defiance, but allies weren't following his lead. Canada, hosting the summit, aligned more with Europe, supporting coordinated climate action, trade reforms, and deeper ties with emerging markets. The EU, led by Ursula von der Leyen, launched major trade initiatives and strengthened partnerships with India, Australia, and Latin America. Trump's proposals, bringing Russia back, ignoring climate accords, and challenging global norms, were largely dismissed. Even Mexico, once a close U.S. partner, condemned new tariffs and hinted at retaliation. The global message was clear. The post-World War II U.S.-led alliance is splintering. Once the convoy's leader, America is now drifting between lanes. For automakers and global industries, the stakes are real. These shifting alliances influence trade routes, regulations, and access to essential materials like lithium and cobalt, vital for EV batteries and supply chains. As the world realigns, U.S. influence faces a critical test. Final lap: U.S. global leadership at a fork in the road. The 2025 G7 summit wasn't just diplomacy, it was a diagnostic test. And the results reveal more than a misfire. From Trump's 50% tariffs to his controversial invitation to authoritarian powers, the administration's approach is reshaping the global track America rides on. At home, Operation Safeguard proved that policy isn't just theory anymore. It's being enforced with the force of a cold, calculated engine. Abroad, allies are forming new circuits of cooperation while the U.S. risks spinning out. So here's the final gear shift. Will America regain traction as a global leader, or stall out in isolation? Can democratic values, cooperation, and mutual respect still power international relations? And more importantly, for our audience here at Highway Herald, how do these geopolitical shifts steer the road ahead for vehicle makers, supply chains, and innovation? Let us know what you think in the comments. We love hearing from fellow car lovers, industry minds, and geopolitics buffs alike. And don't forget, subscribe to Highway Herald for more updates at the intersection of diplomacy and horsepower. Thanks for watching and see you next time. You can now check out any of the videos on the screen. There's more exciting and informative content waiting for you.